Okay, so today we're talking about atoms, and specifically we're talking about electrons. So a couple of things we need to remember about electrons. One is that they are negatively charged. They are found outside the nucleus in electron orbits, orbitals, levels, or shells. Those are the terms we use. They move so rapidly around the nucleus that they create an electron cloud. Remember we said that the Bohr model is great for us to see where things are, but nothing ever stays still. And so the electrons are only at that given point for a split second and then they're moving. The mass is insignificant, and remember, insignificant means it's too light to be counted, very important when you're talking about the atomic mass of an atom. And that in an atom, protons equal electrons. The positive charge equals the negative charge because they are electrically neutral. And they are involved in the formation of chemical bonds, which will become very important to us in just a few short weeks. Now, let's talk about the hydrogen atom. The hydrogen atom has one proton and one electron, okay? It's in the first orbital because electrons fill from the inside out. They fill that first shell first before they move on to the next shell. In the first shell, there may only be 2 electrons. We can only have 2 electrons in the first shell. Next, we'll talk about an oxygen atom. Now, oxygen has 8 protons and 8 electrons. We know this because oxygen is atomic number 8 on the periodic table, and that tells us how many protons and electrons are in a neutral atom. If you notice, when you're looking at the oxygen atom, there's 2 electrons in that first shell, that first orbital, and 6 in the second one. That's because only 2 can be in the first shell, so the remaining 6 have to fill in the second shell. Remember that atoms fill from the inside out, so each atom will fill that first shell before it starts placing atoms or electrons in the subsequent shells. You can put 8 total electrons in the second, third, and fourth shell. However, oxygen only has 8 total, so 2 go in the first orbital and then 6 are in the remaining orbital. Now this outside orbital or outside shell right here is called the valence shell. It is the last shell that is filled for any atom, okay? So in oxygen, the valence shell has 6 electrons and it is the last shell, shell number 2. If you go back to this hydrogen, hydrogen's valence shell was shell number 1 and it had 1 electron. So hydrogen only has 1 valence electron and 1 total electron, whereas oxygen has 8 total electrons, but 6 valence electrons. And that becomes very important when we begin talking about bonding. Now let's talk about sodium. Sodium is atomic number 11, so it's going to have 11 electrons. There's going to be 2 in the first shell of the first level. There's going to be 8 in the second level, but 2 and 8 only give us 10. So we're still going to need to fill 1 in that third level, okay? Remember the levels go 2 in the first, 8 in the second, third, and fourth level. So sodium therefore has 11 total electrons, but only 1 valence electron. Okay, and again, that becomes very important when we start talking about bonding. All right, so at this point, if you're in class, we're going to go ahead and do the beam models where we fill in the electrons. If you click on this link right here, those of you at home, you can get a copy of the lab that we're doing today, and you can use beans or buttons or pennies or anything you want and kind of go through it so that you can get a feel for how the electrons fill. Notice here that 2 can go in the first shell, and then we start filling in shell number 2, 3, and 4, and you have to completely fill 1 level, ring, or shell before you can move on to the next. Now, remember that electrons fill from the inside out. I just said that, 2 in the first shell and 8 in each of the next 3 shells. and that the number of electrons is equal to the number of protons, or atomic number. So if you look at the periodic table, here's the atomic number. So we know that carbon has 6. So go ahead and do that. And then the second assignment for the day is the alchemy to chemistry article.